podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and fantastic to have Craig Young joining us again. How are you, Craig?
Kia ora, Paul. I'm doing well, thank you.
Now, for those who forget who you are or don't know you intimately, maybe you can remind listeners where you fit into this big wide world of tech in New Zealand.
Sure. I'm the CEO of the Technology Users Association, better known as TUANZ. Been around nearly 40 years next March, actually. Well, not me personally. I've been there 10 years, 10 and a bit years. So I'm aiming to make at least this decade count.
Excellent. Oh, it's always good to have you on the show. So thank you for making the effort to pop in and join me in the Podcast New Zealand studio. Now, big thank you, of course, also to our show partners, 1NZ, Spark, 2 Degrees, HP, Workday, and Gorilla Technology. Really appreciative of all they do for the tech sector here, and those that are involved in keeping New Zealand moving forward in the right direction from a technology and an innovation perspective. Well, we've got a bit of New Zealand news, some international topics to delve into. Keen to get an update on what's happening in the world of TUANZ as well. But very, very exciting. We have had news through last week. I think it became official that our own Mark Rocket was to become New Zealand's first astronaut and space tourist. So Mark is the founder and chief executive of Kia Aerospace, president of Aerospace New Zealand, and was a very early investor in Rocket Lab, seed investor there, and was the director there with Peter Beck in the early days of Rocket Lab through to 2011. And over the weekend, he flew aboard Blue Origin's NS-32 mission, and so was able to knock that one off his bucket list. So we will delve into that. I gave Mark a call over the weekend and chatted to him on his way back to New Zealand. So we will share that, and prodded him with one or two questions around that experience. So
ones that we all wanted to ask, Paul. Have you?
Yes,
you got
yeah.
those
Well,
ones?
there's one or two in there.
Okay.
I think people were curious to hear. So so we're looking forward to that. Also on a New Zealand front. New Rocket Lab is expanding, what they do, as has been happening for some time with another acquisition. So they've spent nearly $500 million in New Zealand dollar terms of US based firm Geost, if that's the right way to pronounce it. They specialize in missile tracking technology, depending on whether I use the American or the Kiwi version of that one. I'm really interested to see with each of these acquisitions how that helps sort of shape out Rocket Lab in terms of their future within the space sector, because it wasn't that long ago Rocket Lab was a pretty sort of small player in this whole world. And I remember going out to their HQ near the airport, and on the wall were all of these rockets that they had launched, but they didn't look anything like the sort of rockets that we see on TV. They were down to a handheld sized rocket that could be launched in a forest to be able to get a photo of sort of canopy view of that area, or potentially for other uses that you might think a drone might also suit. But the rockets there were kind of more like the hobbyist type ones, and of course today they are now largely considered, certainly if we're looking in the American market, as the number 2 player to SpaceX from many perspectives.
Well, they really are the poster child of New Zealand high tech, aren't they? It's such a visible technology that people like to see. But exactly what you've talked about, and thinking about Mark Rocket hasn't been there since 2011. It does take a lot of effort to make these things work. Some people are probably sitting out there thinking it's all sort of happened, very easily or immediately. But no, these guys have been working on it a lot. There's a lot to be done before they get there. And I think it's a good learning for New Zealanders to think that, as we get into these types of technologies, that it won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
Sure, I've heard that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Somewhere before, Craig.
Yeah.
Yes, and look, for a well-rounded company in the broader technology world, and I think also when it comes to aerospace and space, often a key trait is that there's not just one string to their bow. And every now and then we see a firm who they live and die on one product or one innovation, one offering in the market. BlackBerry is one that comes to mind, but actually I think BlackBerry are still going, and they've still had some sort of niche things, but as a shadow of their former selves. It's interesting when you look at some of the companies, probably other than the likes of Rocket Lab and other than sort of SpaceX and maybe things like the what do they call themselves? ULA, the Launch Alliance, United Launch Alliance. They're in most cases there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and in terms of Rocket Lab's own future, increasingly the revenue will come from this variety of offerings. So although probably public and a lot of investors are pinning a lot of hopes on what's next, in Rocket Lab's case the Neutron is the big focus. They're much bigger rocket that can really compete on a much more broader basis than what they're able to do today on the launch side. Actually, all these other pieces are really important to their future and their long-term success.
Well, I think the other thing you pick up out of this story is how important for this type of technology, because of the cost that's involved, is how important defense is and contracts for defense. So you think of Elon Musk and the Europeans, etc. You can't afford to have a company like this unless you're in the defense market. And maybe 4 or 5 years ago there might have been an outcry about Rocket Lab getting into defense, but we know that with this type of technology you need to get into that space, and there seems to be a more accepting's perhaps not the right word, but and maybe you've got a view on this, but as these companies get into defence, because of the way defence spending's going these days, that there's less of a clamour if it happens. I don't know, but I just felt that reading this story that here they were buying a defence company, missile tracking. What are they calling it? The Golden Dome as well. They could be involved in Trump's Golden Dome. That we're getting involved in these sorts of things, but it shows that you've got to, because that's where your funding's coming from.
Yeah. Look, I think, there is, as a country, New Zealand, we've very much generally leaned in a direction of peace and peacefulness from a whole lot of perspectives. So there certainly is that sort of pushback that comes against the aerospace sector from a range of people, and there'll be a handful, a dozen or or two, folks that'll turn out when there's an aerospace summit or something. They in the scheme of it, it's a reasonably small number, and I think we've got to be pragmatic about these things. And as a country, we're probably pretty weak from a defence perspective. So actually being able to contribute something that can help defend other nations has a flow-on effect to New Zealand as well when times of trouble come, which inevitably throughout history there is a need to be able to defend yourself or have some good partnerships to help to defend a nation. Now, I would certainly hope that that's not any time soon, and maybe that it's well beyond our lifetimes. But there are good actors and bad actors on the global stage. We've got wars happening right now, and actually, New Zealand is playing a role in what I would call positive innovations that probably help keep the world safer. And I know there's a flip side, and whenever you defend or design these technologies, they can get used in either direction. But
well, there's some amazing drone technology being developed in New Zealand. It was good to see in the last defence conversations about spending, given there was very little in the budget about technology, but there was mention in there about working with New Zealand drone development and developers. And, even just seeing at the weekend what's happened in Russia over the weekend, drone technology looks to be a critical part of defence technology going forward. So good to see them working with New Zealand companies.
Yes, and I saw some of the media coverage around this, wipeout of all these bombers in Russia by Ukraine. An offensive from Ukraine to wipe them out, being referred to as Russia's Pearl Harbor moment. And that, to me, put it in a different context, because we're so far away in New Zealand, and our life here is relatively safe in the scheme of things, right? Don't even have snakes, and there's not too much that's kind of at that level of putting mass lives at risk at any one moment anyway. So that to me was a bit of a wake up. And I think sometimes the lens through which we look at these things is pretty foggy because of that distance, and it's hard to really understand what it would be like to be living in Ukraine right now, what it would be like to be in other parts of the world where life is pretty tough, of which at any one time there's multiple things going on. And so I think there's something to be said for having a reality check from time to time. Now on to slightly less serious topic. Tesla have indicated that they're testing driverless versions of their Model Y in Texas, in Austin, Texas, and that as of, I think when I read it last week, they were a few days into it, so maybe they're a week or more into that now. And these vehicles are driving around ahead of this robo-taxi launch that they've announced, and these trials are running with nobody sitting in the driver's seat. So that's a reasonably new one for Tesla. I think at one of their events last year there was a little bit of that, but it was in a very small sort of constrained area. But for these vehicles to be out on the road without a physical driver is a new step. And depending on how much you've got somebody sitting back at a Tesla location, or I don't know, I'm not sure it'd be quite a working from home job. There's an element there which you can have remote drivers that can step in when things happen. But this gives me some encouragement that this technology is moving along, and I've got a bit of a vested interest, being in the direction of 6 years into owning a Tesla with the premium full self-drive feature, which of course does nothing of the sort in New Zealand, to certainly to this sort of level of being able to drive you around whilst maybe having a snooze. But it's very interesting to see this side of things move forwards. That's for sure. So they're expecting to launch, I think, commercially, pretty shortly. Maybe this month. There are, I think a few bits and pieces on that front of debate out there, and can this sort of camera only approach really work for autonomous vehicles, or do you need much more expensive tech, which has been Waymo's approach?
Well, they have had going for a while this service in, I think it's Las Vegas. I've had a friend who went to a conference there, I think it might have been 2023, and he took a Tesla from one hotel to another, but it was underground. It was only the Teslas running in these tunnels.
Yeah.
So while it was driverless, there was nothing else happening around it.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this is quite a shift. And you're right, it's this, relying only on cameras rather than using LiDAR or radar. So it's going to be fascinating to see. And especially now that Elon Musk is back there taking a bigger interest in what's going on, whether how this comes through, and whether we as humans will feel comfortable in that environment. I mean, I know I've talked to people who've been to San Francisco and been in the Waymos.
Yeah,
it's a bit strange, but you get used to it. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but that might. This. I think, talking about New Zealand, I always think of roads like the one from Honganui to Ratahi, and whether I'd really be comfortable sitting in a driverless car driving up that road, given I know there's still some mobile black spots along there. So it'll come.
Yeah. It's an era that's continuing to change. I think it's largely positive to see progress in this area. The other company that has certainly caught my attention, that's doing something somewhat similar to Tesla, is Wave AI, co-founded by Kiwi Alex Kendall. In 2017, they're about 8 years into their journey, and you could argue that in some regards they're ahead of Tesla, but they don't have the scale of vehicles that Tesla have on the road. So this will be an interesting one, I'm sure. Investors, those that have bought into Tesla stock, will be very hopeful that Tesla kind of carves out something of a big market share in this space. I guess I'm excited to see a Kiwi involved in this as well, and there are others that are down that camera-based track rather than relying on the expensive sort of laser approach of LiDAR, which is got varying pros and cons, but it's certainly a lot more expensive. So I actually there was one thing, I'm not sure we mentioned it. Tesla did share some footage of the FSD. I think the current version is called unsupervised, and this was what I used. Although now 6 months. How many months? 6 months ago in San Francisco, which was the Tesla full self-driving, unsupervised or supervised version, should I say? So you still have to keep your eyes on the road. Running in Australia, so Tesla have now publicly shared a video of that happening. And if it runs in Australia, then there's not really too much different with New Zealand. We know they did do testing here some years ago. In fact, I didn't speak directly to them, but someone who who I know well, knew somebody that was engaged in that testing, which they were sworn to secrecy, and so unfortunately I wasn't able to get any insights from that. But yeah, good to know New Zealand's not completely off the map on these things. All right, onto other topics. Actually, there was one bit of news around Tesla and their FSD software ignoring school bus lights and hitting a child dummy in a staged demonstration. And so this one, I think it was one of the US government entities that had staged this particular demo. Oh no, actually, this one is from the Dawn Project.
Oh, okay.
Who, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on this, they're kind of very anti Tesla,
Right.
and so in their video you see this dummy, getting slid across in front of the
Right.
Tesla, and the Tesla hitting it and its head rolling off.
Oh.
But the way that I've seen the Tesla software work, in fact, I remember it. I was just about home one day, and the whole family kind of ran out into the street, and I was trying out the technology, and I must have had the window down. They're like, "Oh, thank you for stopping," and it was like, well, it wasn't actually me. It was the car had done the job, and of course I would have stopped too. I can assure you. Yep. But it responded in that case appropriately without me needing to. So it's interesting to watch these things. But there are different variations on the software and the technology available, and I think probably most of us are in the camp that you're not going to be relying on technology until the technology is better than human level in terms of how it reacts and how safe it is. Otherwise it's going to be us in the driver's seat for a lot longer to come. Yeah. Now, online sort of child safety, there's interesting moves afoot here, and New Zealand, of course, there's a discussion going on. Australia, they've put their legislation in place. What is interesting is the US, where so many things tend to happen state by state. So the governor of Texas has signed an online safety law requiring Google and Apple to verify users' ages before app downloads. So the comment says minors will need parental consent for app access. Critics are arguing, including Apple, that this law threatens user privacy because in order to prove that, then you're going to have to use some form of user verification that ties a person back to every device. And look, I think there's pros and cons of these things. I don't know what the right approach is. I do find it fascinating to see different states and different countries trying a range of approaches to land on something. We've got Nebraska, who are adopting a law aimed at curbing youngsters' time online, what they call the Age Appropriate Design Code Act, mandating online platforms prioritize children's safety in digital design. So this is another approach, and it's been inspired by UK legislation, and the law requires age verification and limits data. And of course, there's a group of people who say, hey, this is a win for child protection. And again, you've got on the other side folks saying, yes, but this brings issues with privacy and how it's implemented. What are your thoughts, Craig, on these topics? Can you see a good way forward that's going to please please everybody, or are we always going to be having these sort of debates for forever?
This is a really tricky one, and I think if you look at the first one around what's happening in Texas, we are seeing that happen in other places. We got, just across the ditch, we've got Australia have got rules that are coming into play later in the year, and we should watch carefully what happens over there. I think the Nebraska one reminds me, and look, I'm going off the top of my head here. Haven't they done something like that in Singapore, where they said, put in some limits on young people's use of social media? It is a really tricky one. It's like, it feels like it's something that sounds good. This is, we're protecting children, and we're going to put these things in place. A lot of the time, they are put in place by people who don't necessarily understand how the technology works, and perhaps don't know, haven't used it themselves. That might be a bit harsh, but if you look at the demographics of some of those US lawmakers in particular, my biggest concern is just how you implement it and make it work. And so rather than passing a law, and I see this in a number of areas, we really need to work together with technology companies and users and government. You need the trinity, as it were, to work together on what can we actually do that's going to be viable, and then work towards something where our devices are able to figure out, what age you are, etc. There will be privacy issues, but I always come back to the one where sometimes safety overrides privacy. And the one that I always come back to is, if I turn up in hospital, I want the doctor there to know my medical history. If I'm unconscious, I want them to know what's going on with me, right? And if you over-engineer privacy, that person may not have access to your records because you've over-engineered the privacy part. Now, it's the same in this case. It's like, well, yes, children and young people do have rights and obligations around privacy, but we also have to think it from the safety. So it's going to be a balance over time, and it'll take us a while to get to the point where the technology actually works properly. And maybe there'll always be ways around things, Paul.
I think there will, and there's this element here of what's the role of the parent, right? So let's say you put in a law on this. Let's say New Zealand goes ahead, blocks access to a whole raft of apps, social media, pornography, violent content. Let's say we just go a bit further than what's being proposed around social media. There's nothing, more than likely that would then stop a parent who has a more kind of live and let die type approach, or whatever, to put a device in front of a child that has all the things that they shouldn't access. So, and then of course the flip side to that is, well, every parent today will have some ability to influence and control what happens to a child that they care for, right? So
this is the Texas one, right? The Texas one is, if you think about Texas and you think about the governing approach to those sorts of things, the parental consent is the key element there. They're all about getting power back into with the parents. But the problem is, maybe not the problem, but the concern I have is not all parents are well educated on what these things are. And so they may not have the information they need to make a valid decision around what their child can have and can't have access to. This has been going on for ages. My kids are in their 30s, and I go back to when Facebook first started, and they asked, can we go on Facebook? And what we did was we said, sure, but we have to be your friends. You have to let us be your friends on Facebook so we can see what you're doing. And that was the way that we dealt with that. Yes, they were teenagers, so they were already older, But the way we did it was that. And so we were able to work with, talk to them about what was happening, what was going on. So we took that approach.
Fantastic.
Not saying it's the right approach, but that was the one we worked at.
Well, I think the beauty of that sort of approach is it can be made fit for a given situation rather than being a sledgehammer approach, which says, hey, this is all mandated centrally, and there is no discretion for parents, right? And I think we get into all manner of debates on these sorts of topics, and there are varying things that'll go on within the school, and it's like, well, parents can have their child in that class or pull the child out of that class, and then this is sort of now starting to, I guess, come more into a home type context.
I'll give you another piece of advice. When your kids leave home and they're 18 and they're adults, might be a good idea to unfriend and leave it if you don't want to see what they're up to and Dunedin at the parties, etc. So there's a whole nother story that goes with that one.
Oh well, I'm not at that point yet. So yeah, I'll yet to need to make such decisions. But needless to say, I think the flip side to a government kind of having the complete control is not perfection either, right?
No,
and there's all sorts of different approaches and challenges. All right, well let's jump in and hear from you. What's been happening in the world of TUANZ? I was going to call you the Telecommunications Users Association of New Zealand, which was your name some years ago.
It was,
but not anymore.
No. So we are the technology users, and that's very clear that we did that change in 2020. There was this other thing called COVID at the same time, but it was a recognition that there was nobody speaking in that space, but also that telecommunications was becoming integrated with so many other things. While it's a key element and it's still part of our DNA, the ability to connect, and lots of questions around there. So, for example, we had our annual conference that was focused on connectivity 2 weeks ago. We changed it from the Rural Connectivity Symposium to calling it the Connecting Aotearoa. So it was addressing the question, why can't 100% of New Zealanders be connected? So it wasn't just focusing on rural. So but we did talk about rural, but we talked about other things like affordability, inequity, and resiliency, and so all those sorts of things. What's the technology coming? So because you can't do things unless you're connected. So it's still pretty key. And we're 40 years old next year, so we're going to be thinking about what's happened over those 40 years. But what we're always thinking about is, how do these things impact the people that use this technology? So our biggest members, and most of our members, that are part of our association, because we are a membership association, we're not government funded. They are organisations that use technology in their business. And the people we connect with, and if you think about some of the bigger telcos or IT companies, often the people we're talking to there are not the ones you'd think we talk to. We're talking to their CIOs and the people that are rolling out technology in their companies. And so what we try to do is always focus on that thing. We're always trying to help them understand what's coming down the track. So listening to podcasts like this, I have my own one, thinking about the topics that are happening and impacting them. And then also looking outwards about working with decision makers and stakeholders. So, talking to the large technology companies, the telcos, and then especially government, this is what we think needs to be done, or what's happening down the track, and the user perspective on that one. So that's where we're coming from. So yes, we want a technology industry in New Zealand because we want to use the technology, but it's not our core. But at core, we're thinking about the use of the technology, which is always really interesting. Yeah.
Now, a bit back to the topic of connecting Aotearoa. As a country, we have the best connectivity that we've ever had, and we have a long history of connectedness in various forms, back to an early telegraph line in 18 whatever it was. You probably know some of these stats better than I can recall. Through to now, where we're starting to see mobile networks get connected up to satellites. We've got an incredible infrastructure in terms of fiber to a pretty solid chunk of the population. I think around 86% of homes have that option to connect to the ultra fast broadband network. Then we've got thanks to some of our show partners, some pretty good connectivity via mobile networks when you're on the go, or for rural broadband and so on. There's Wi-Fi, and then of course the satellite connectivity that has become broadly available now across New Zealand and around the world, that sort of filled in a gap. But there are still challenges, right? What would you say are the biggest challenges that we have as a country from that connectivity perspective?
Oh, it's a big question, actually. There's a couple of things in there, because you can talk about, we have this amazing technology and amazing connectivity networks that are rolled out. Not everyone can afford it, so we have to think about that question.
Is that the biggest challenge now?
I think there's a range of them. One is affordability, where that network is. So I know there are moves and there's pilots happening, and there's some amazing mahi working with social organisations, and some of our big telcos are looking at that as well. I think the other thing is, we've still got a bit of a disconnect between the amazing work that we have done, and let's be clear that there has been some very awesome work done in the space of rolling out fiber to the number you talked about and getting these mobile networks out there. We've got Starlink, but there are still some lived experiences where the capability is not yet there, or not to scratch, and the concern that I get is that as we improve and the urban experience, and we'll just call it the urban experience, right? As the urban experience gets better, because it does, and if you look at what's happening in the moment, Chorus is about to triple their lowest, their most common speed band, which is 100 megs. They're going to 300.
That's right. Yes.
Yep. So, but that's not happening in rural or in areas where that's not available. So, while we've moved the dial and got the capability in place, it's continually moving. So you got to keep it up. So, and the other thing that concerns me, and I know it's quite a high level thing, but if you ask people, some people, has rural been solved? Some people will come back to you and go, yes, just buy Starlink. Well, Starlink, there's a couple of things in there. One is, it's not the cheapest, and secondly, it's owned by this one guy in America who has his finger on the on-off switch. So really what we want to see is more competitors into the New Zealand market. We want to see the Project Kuipers from AWS, Amazon. We want to see these other ones come, because we need competition to keep people on their toes, and that brings price competition as well.
Yep.
So I think we're at the place now, Paul, where we can't sort of say there's a silver bullet. There's actually a whole range of things that have to be done. And one of the things we picked up at the most recent conference is having the wireless ISPs, or the regional players there, is that they are starting to move to roll out their own fibre.
Yes, yeah. In fact, we've got somebody on our list who's involved in that world, who will look to get on an episode to delve into that, because it's quite fascinating to see a local, what was a WISP, wireless internet service provider, actually we'll see that those type of entities rolling out fibre.
Yeah, and my message to all those decision makers, so the Choruses of the world, the LFC, the local fibre companies, the government, is support that, encourage it, because rolling out fibre to those regional areas will mean the big players don't have to spend their money in that space, and they can put it somewhere else. Don't ever overbuild them. Let's take a holistic New Zealand perspective to this. So these are the sorts of things that we'll be talking about coming out of our summit that we had 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's great to see the picture improving, but there's more to do. from what I can tell, there's nowhere on Earth where there's a country that's providing sort of free internet, is there? It's there's a cost to it, like power, like water, but no one's sort of generally bundling it. And I think the closest, when I was looking at it, there may be one or two places with some specific types of service offerings, but generally not free unless it's sort of limited location. So Taiwan set up a service which would deliver free Wi-Fi to citizens and tourists, and this was over a decade ago, I think 2014. But that's just in public hotspots and so on, which we've seen variations on that in varying forms. And I guess as a smaller nation, not so hard to roll that sort of thing out.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for that update, Craig. Now we're going to jump into my phone call with Mark Rocket, which I mentioned earlier. And of course, if you are watching our video stream, you'll catch a bit of sort of video background to that. For anyone that's listening in to the audio podcast and you're kind of curious to see this footage, then there's a range of footage online. But of course, I would recommend that you make sure you're following us on where you consume video. We do have video by following me with our live stream, which is most episodes end up being live streamed through on LinkedIn. You can, as I say, following me and follow NZ Tech Podcast on LinkedIn for our other content there. But we're also across the likes of YouTube, Facebook, and X. So so useful if you want to see the video. But we'll roll that phone call with the video and the photos in the background now. And this is from my chat with Mark on Sunday US time, Monday morning, and a little bit of background noise because he was at the airport trying to get out of Dodge and get back to New Zealand.
Congratulations, Mark. Pretty exciting milestone for New Zealand. Wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how it all came about. How long's this kind of been in train to happen for you?
Yeah, well, I've been wanting to go to space for a long time, and it sort of came together this year. So it's been a dream since I was a little kid, and to finally make it up was amazing.
Fantastic. And what did the days leading up to getting to space look like? What's the actual journey in terms of training and hoops that you had to jump through before it could happen?
Yeah, well, we did a couple of days of training in Texas before we take off, just so we knew exactly what the flight profile was going to mean for us and how we were going to navigate that as efficiently as possible. It was pretty intense training, but the Blue Origin crew did a fantastic job of getting us really comfortable with all the process that we needed to work through.
Yep. And how safe did you feel? Because they've had this has been very successful and so on. But as soon as I heard you were flying, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because there is that level of risk, and to know that someone that personally is going to be taking that risk, it gave me a small sort of cause for concern. Was that on your mind at all, or were you totally relaxed?
The reality is you are sitting on top of a controlled explosion. So there is always the element of nervousness, but I felt really comfortable with the Blue Origin approach, and they have an escape system which makes it a lot better. If there is some sort of failure with the rocket engine, then you do have that kind of escape system which will sort of push you above that. So I felt relatively safe, but at the same time, you're going 3,400 kilometers per hour. So it's pretty, there's a bit of adrenaline involved. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. And, what was it like sort of leading up to the launch? Because the actual journey itself is, it all happens quite fast, but, those kind of few hours leading up to it, what was that like?
Yeah, well, again, the Blue Origin team just did an amazing job of just going through a really steady process. And from a couple of hours out, we just went through the steps, and we knew there were certain things that we needed to get through as far as the weather and the technical hurdles, and everything came together right on schedule for us. I think we're maybe 9 or 10 minutes late in the end. But yeah, that morning went really smoothly.
The first time that you go on a big plane or something, that's like, oh, this is pretty cool doing takeoff. But tell us how it felt with the liftoff.
Essentially, you've got a really smooth acceleration. It's kind of like being on an elevator, but it just keeps speeding up and speeding up for a few minutes to that point where you're going 3,400 kilometers per hour. So it's just a huge acceleration, and obviously a bit of an adrenaline rush, and at the same time, you're looking out the window and you're seeing the Earth disappear below you, and you can feel the rocket correcting itself to point up in the right direction. Yeah, just a huge acceleration that you're experiencing. And then the main engine cuts off, and that gives you a bit of a thump. And then there's an even bigger thump when there's a stage separation. So effectively, most of your rocket ship drops off below you. And then, very quickly, you sort of feel yourself in a zero gravity environment. And so you got to transition mentally away from that adrenaline rush into trying to enjoy that serenity and tranquility of zero gravity.
Wow. So you got a good view on the way up, and then when you went into zero gravity, then you can kind of float around, experience that, and enjoy the view from, I guess, the top. You're above the Kármán line, above 100 kilometers above Earth at that stage.
Yeah, well, you've got a few minutes of zero gravity where you can unbuckle and do some flips and move around the cabin. So you really want to make the most of it, and at the same time, you want to look out the window and see space and see the Earth. And what surprised me was just the inky blackness of space. It is really intense, and photos don't really do it justice. And it's daytime, so you can't see the stars, but you can just see this immense blackness of space, which was quite profound.
Yeah, I've heard others sort of say that. Has it left you with any kind of any big impressions, or like you've had about a day or so to take it all in? Has it changed your views on the world in any way, or?
Well, I think it's been a pretty full-on 24 hours, so still processing that. But yeah, I mean, I've always kind of thought that we're this planet orbiting the sun and this immense solar system, but there's this vast emptiness, blackness of space, and obviously we don't really get to experience that in normal life until you do something like this, and to see that, it just really sort of shows the stark fragility of the planet.
And then you had to come back down to Earth. How was that piece?
Yeah, well, that was pretty exciting as well. You buckle in and very quickly, within a minute or so, the G's start going up. Quite a bit of speed going through the upper atmosphere where there isn't very much there. The atmosphere's very thin as you sort of descend down, and we got up to about 5 Gs, which is like 5 people your size, your body weight's stacked on top of you, and your face pulling back. So just a few seconds of 5 Gs, and then as the atmosphere thickens, the vehicle starts to slow down, and then obviously it's always a moment of relief when the parachutes deploy. First of all, you have the smaller drogue parachutes,
Yes.
and then a little bit after that, you have the big main chutes. And when those main chutes open, everyone breathes a bit of a sigh of relief.
I bet. Are you lining up for another future space journey? Do you think you would do it again? Maybe on a Neutron or something like that?
I don't know. I'll just take a bit of time to think about things first. But yeah, I certainly loved the flight and couldn't recommend it highly enough to people. It's if you do have a dream of going to space, that it's going to become more and more accessible over the next few years. And you've got companies like Blue Origin that are putting a lot of resources into making it possible. And the price is going to get more accessible, and it'll mean that tens of thousands of people will be able to access spaceflight. It's kind of like how airlines were in the 20s and 30s, 1920s, 1930s. It became a lot more accessible in the subsequent decades, and I feel that's going to be the same way with space. spaceflight.
Yeah, that's exciting. Can you tell us what it costs to ride New Shepard, or are you under a confidentiality agreement on that sort of thing at this point?
Yeah, that's right. All passengers have to sign a non-disclosure. So yeah, that's not something we can talk about.
Yeah, yep, fair enough. I guess your own company, Kia Aerospace, is continuing to make progress with solar-powered stratospheric aircraft, and there are also hundreds of other companies in New Zealand involved in aerospace. What's exciting, you at the moment about what's going on with Kia or about the broader sort of aerospace sector in New Zealand?
There's a lot of really exciting companies in New Zealand. I'm president of Aerospace New Zealand, which is an industry body which promotes the interests of the aerospace industry and tries to move it forward. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, and really, I'm hoping that this space flight will kind of highlight, those people that have dreams, those kids that have dreams of going to space one day. It's all very possible, and beyond that, maybe you can get involved with the aerospace industry in New Zealand. We've got a lot of really good stuff that is starting to open up, and hopefully we'll create thousands, tens of thousands of aerospace jobs for the future.
Great. And for those that are interested in getting involved in the sector in some way, what's the best start in terms of study or in terms of looking up for where the openings are and what sort of direction to take?
Yeah, well, there are so many different avenues, so many different ways to get into the aerospace industry, whether it's engineering or customer experience or weather analysis or data analysis, hardware, software. There are so many different skill sets that are needed to deploy these aerospace technologies. So, I guess, try and find an area that you're interested in and see where that applies in the aerospace industry, and talk to people at universities, talk to people at high schools, find out, what could be a potential career path. And maybe, in your spare time, research a little bit about advanced aviation or space technologies that you're interested in, and upskill yourself on that.
Fantastic. And in terms of events, when's your next annual event coming up for Aerospace New Zealand?
If you go to aerospace.org.nz, then that gives you an events calendar. So we've got some events coming up. Actually, this week there's one in Wellington, and a few more coming up. And the big one is October 7th and 8th. That's the New Zealand Aerospace Summit, where all of New Zealand's aerospace companies are pretty much there, and we've got international delegates from all around the world flying in. So that's going to be a big event, and probably around 1,000 people in Christchurch for that.
Great. Well, it might be a chance for some to come and shake the hand of New Zealand's first astronaut.
Yeah, it would be great to see people there.
Fantastic. Oh, thanks so much for that, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Okay, see you.
Wow, that was great to hear from Mark Rocket. Pretty exciting. How did you feel after sort of hearing that? Does that sort of spark something? Do you think this is going to spark an increased interest in the possibilities for Kiwis to be involved in the aerospace sector?
Well, the first thing was I was just really disappointed that it wasn't me being the first one in space. Every young child, particularly when I was growing up, because I remember the first man on the moon. Oh, that shows how old I am. Wanted to be the first New Zealander. But Mark's done an amazing job. And I do think, and I think that keen to hear his story, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be willing to share it quite a lot around the place. And so, it could well set some people off on a technology journey that'd be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yep. I think really pleasing, and well done, Mark, on getting there and making it happen, right? Because he's not the only the only Kiwi that's been kind of queuing up and probably with the means to be able to make it happen, but he's done it. So that's really exciting, and interesting in terms of his comments of space tourism in the future. I guess as our first space tourist, him sort of indicating that these costs, as they do with things that involve technology, as it did with airplane air travel, the cost will come down, and this idea that, hey, tens of thousands of people, it's not a long way off when big numbers of people will be getting up to space from a tourism perspective, which creates some interesting probably discussions for another day on
sell your Tesla, mate, and use that money to go up in space.
Yeah, cars tend to devalue,
Yeah,
Craig.
that's true.
I'm not sure that'd get me too far, but might give me the flights to the US. A different story if at that stage I'd invested the money into Tesla stocks. That might have actually, and I know there a bunch of Kiwis that didn't invest at that time in Tesla stocks rather than buying vehicles, or did both, and so there's probably some of our listeners who could put themselves on a future ride, maybe not to the moon, but at least up to beyond the Kármán line. So yeah, really exciting to have that happen, and with somebody that's part of our tech and aerospace sector here in New Zealand. So yeah, we'll look forward to who's next, and I would imagine from here, it will be probably a reasonably fast paced for people to start going up into space as far as Kiwis. So number one, here we are, June. Well, it was I think it was technically 31st of May in the US, but I guess we could start placing bets on who's next and how soon that will be. But I would imagine it's not another decade away. Well, that's us for this episode. So thank you very much, Craig, for joining us. And encourage folks to go and look up the TUANZ website if you want to get on the mailing list. Check out Craig's podcast. There's a bunch of things there, and if you're at an organisation of any scale that is a user of technology, which will be a lot of our listeners, maybe there's an opportunity to get in behind and become a supporter of TUANZ and the great work here. And of course, a big thank you for our show partners for this episode, to Workday, Gorilla Technology, HP, 2 Degrees, Spark, and 1NZ. Did I say Workday? And Workday. If I didn't, I think I've double said Workday. Thank you, Workday, for being our newest show partner and supporter. And thanks, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode of the New Zealand Tech Podcast. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.